Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up as we're closing out our James Bond retrospective. Now that the long-awaited No Time to Die has finally had its release, it's time to rank our 007 favourite James Bond foes. The pantheon of antagonists over the last 60 years of the Bond series holds a position all its own in the Film Villainy Hall of Fame. From the eye-patch-adorned Emilio Largo calling the shots and holding the world to ransom in Thunderball, to the duplicitous Electra King in The World Is Not Enough, the Bond movies celebrate villains of all colours and creeds and all levels of fanaticism. Of course, our 6 official Bond actors to date have all faced their fair share of foes, some significantly dastardlier and more sadistic than others. In this list, we'll be sharing our 007 favourites from the last 60 years. We'll also take a look at some honourable and dishonourable mentions as we go. Before we get started, let us know your own favourite Bond baddies in the comments below. And remember, this is our subjective list, so if you don't agree, please be kind. Let's go. Before we kick off our list, let's take a look at some of our dishonourable mentions, the villains that, for whatever reason, failed to ignite the screen for this Bond fan. We're talking the likes of Julian Glover's Aristotle Christatos from For Your Eyes Only, far too subliminal to pose any serious threat to Bond, aside perhaps from masterminding the Keelhaul sequence, an action beat lifted directly from Fleming novel Live and Let Die. Joe Don Baker's Brad Whitaker of The Living Daylights is also perhaps the most uninspired heavy in the Bond canon. He has very little to bring to proceedings, save for an amusing scene opposite Dalton's Bond with his toy soldiers during the finale. More impressive is Andreas Wisniewski's henchman Necros. Jonathan Pryce is a terrific, versatile actor, but his Elliot Carver chews up the screen with cheesy dialogue and never poses any serious concern to Brosnan's cooler-than-cool Bond in Tomorrow Never Dies. Pomposity is the order of the day in Die Another Day, with Will Yun-Lee's far more interesting Colonel Moon transformed into Toby Stephens' English snob Gustav Graves in the film's second half. The dialogue is shockingly crass. The one saving grace is the vicious fight against Bond at Blades during the fencing sequence. For our final dishonourable mentions, we're moving to the Craig era and to some iterations of Bond's greatest enemy, Ernst Stavro Blofeld. Matthew Amoric's Dominic Green, and his sidekick Elvis, for that matter, are some of the series' weakest heavies. He's loquacious and looks sleazy, but has little screen presence whatsoever, particularly when sandwiched between Le Chiffre and Raoul Silva, 2 of the series' top villains. Now we come to Blofeld and the weakest interpretations of the character in the official series. Charles Gregg's campy, dressing in drag antagonist of Diamonds Are Forever, and the regrettably bad Christoph Waltz from Spectre and No Time to Die, who appears to be a shadowy, intimidating presence at first, before being entirely wasted. We start our honourable mentions at the beginning of the canon with Joseph Wiseman's terrific Dr. No. Only afforded 15 minutes of screen time, and he's still more intimidating and engrossing than any of our dishonourable mentions. Next up is the aforementioned Emilio Largo, played by Adolfo Celli from Thunderball. A typically underrated villain in the series, this foe is suitably sadistic and gets stuck in with some of the action, particularly in the underwater battle finale. The eye patch is just the icing on the cake. We move to the Moore era now, and a villain this fan never used to hold in much regard, Michael Lonsdale's loquacious Hugo Drax. As far removed from Fleming's character from the Moonraker novel as you can get, yet still a memorable adversary for Bond, who is afforded a suitable, hoisted by his own petard death in the hands of Bond. Talking of villains I never used to have much time for, who've grown on me the more I watch these movies, it's Sean Bean's 006, Alec Trevelyan. It's a strong character arc, beginning the movie as one of Bond's closest allies, as a fellow agent, before he attempts to exact his revenge on MI6 and England as a whole. The fight with Bond on the dish during the finale is one of the best hand-to-hand fisticuffs the series has to offer. Now to two villains from the Daniel Craig era of Bond who didn't quite make the final cut. First up, Mads Mikkelsen's Le Chiffre from the rebooted brilliance that is Casino Royale. Giving the character a bleeding tear duct is inspired, and the character gets to spar brilliantly with Craig's Bond, particularly during the torture sequence. He's a simultaneously charismatic and chilling figure in the canon. And our final honourable mention goes to the series' latest antagonist, Rami Malek's Lucifer Safin. He's a generally enigmatic figure who doesn't really reveal his true intentions until the final act, but he's a solid final villain for Craig's Bond tenure, who, in his own words and silky mannerisms, creeps under your skin. So we kick off the top 7 at 7 with Max Zorin. Alongside his cohort Mayday, Christopher Walken's Maximilian Zorin is the most psychotic and devilish Bond villain up to this point in the series, and is certainly the most interesting villain of the Roger Moore era of the series. Though Zorin's scheme to flood Silicon Valley has more than a faint trace of Goldfinger's plot to irradiate the gold in Fort Knox for his own gain, Zorin marks one of the most larger-than-life villains in the series, and one of the best villains since Scaramanga. Talking of, at 6, we've Francisco Scaramanga. A lurking background presence until the second act, where Bond and the villain first meet, Christopher Lee is great acting pedigree for the Bond Villain Hall of Fame. It's just a shame that an actor of Lee's caliber is placed in a tonally uneven film such as this. Forgive us, but we're cheating a little at number 5. We needed to include archenemy Ernst Stavro Blofeld on our list, but how do you choose between the shadowy mid-body shots of the character in From Russia with Love and Thunderball against Donald Pleasance's first full reveal of the character in You Only Live Twice, and Telly Savalas's more physical interpretation in Majesty's Secret Service? If I were to pick a favourite, it would be Pleasance for the iconic look of the character with the scarred eye and the incredible volcano base. In fourth place, probably surprisingly, is a villain usually atop most fans' lists, Gert Frober's inimitable Auric Goldfinger. The most larger-than-life villain of the early Bond villains, complete with loyal manservant Oddjob, Goldfinger's scheme is genius, and Gert Frober embellishes the character with wit, menace and admiration from the viewer. A superb antagonist in the series who you're actually rooting for much of the screen time. Plus we get the iconic laser table interaction and the golf game with Connery's Bond. These top 3 Bond antagonists are, in our opinion, 3 of the series' very best. In the bronze position we have the double of Donald Red Grant and Rosa Klebb from Russia with Love. Klebb is the schemer, former member of Smesh, the Russian organization, who has now joined Spectre and plays Bond and Tatiana Romanova as pawns, and Grant, recruited by Spectre, is the true heavy. Cold and calculating, this double act of authority and heavy are played by 2 of the finest actors in the series, Lotte Lenya and Robert Shaw. A significant step up from Dr. No, as these 2 are lurking presences throughout the film and get a significant amount of screen time. Grant aboard the Orient Express, stalking Bond and being one step ahead of him at all times, culminating in the extraordinary head-to-head on the train, is one of the series' greatest moments. In second place, we've Franz Sanchez. From the chillingly brilliant introduction, whipping his cheating girlfriend and ordering her lover's heart to be cut out, Robert Davi's Sanchez commands the screen for every second he appears. He's the dark side of 007 himself, and his undoing by Bond and interactions with Dalton's 007 are fantastic. Sanchez is vicious, rewards loyalty above all, and is taken down in the greatest way by Bond with a genuine Felix Leiter. He's a villain ripped straight from the headlines in the 80s and feels one of the most authentic baddies in the canon. So that leaves us with our favourite Bond villain, and it's Javier Bardem's mighty Tiago Rodriguez, best known as Raul Silva. He's a background presence, blowing up MI6 and taunting Dentures M to think on her sins before the fabulous monologue just over an hour in about the 2 rats left standing, he and Bond. He's disfigured, he's got the gift of the gab, he taunts Bond about his craft, he's a former MI6 agent gone rogue, and he gets under the skin. The added dimension of the central villain's connection with M gives the character extra weight. Bardem imbues the character with such personality and has the best screen presence of any villain in the series. So, those are our 2 cents on the Hall of Bond villainy fame. Which are your favourite Bond villains over the last 60 years, and which actor do you think could play a future Bond antagonist? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel at the top of the page. Come and find Crawford-Clark Close-Up on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can find us on Letterboxd, search CC Close-Up, and you can find the rest of our Bond reviews on our channel playlist. Stay tuned to the channel as we'll be bringing you our favourite 60 moments from the Bond series, as well as our ranking of all 25 movies in the series to date. Thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.